Welcome back to another episode of
Just
a
a
squirrel
squirrel
looking for
for
a nut,
nut,
trying to
trying to
get
get
out of this
this
rut.
rut. Oh my God.
Not bad. Yeah.
We kind of did it. Now we may have to add another squirrel to this just to shake it up sometime soon.
We should.
In the meantime, whoa! Did I just see another squirrel pop into the house?
Glad to be here.
It's our homeboy, brother man, Tripp Bodenheimer, squirrel extraordinaire. Welcome to the show.
I'm glad y'all keep calling me back.
You ain't going anywhere. You're stuck in squirreldom until the dog chases you away. Look, I'm going to tell y'all a secret here. Just before this came on, I had to walk all the way down to the first floor of my apartment building to get the mail. Why isn't there an elevator for that? Can't there be a transporter or something? That is a lot of work. What is the world? What kind of world are we living in? I have a machine that can wash the dishes for me. I don't even have to beat my clothes on a rock. I just stick it in the machine. Cannot they come up with a machine to somehow help me just go down and snap my fingers and get my mail? What about some sort of tube thing that would stick it and just have it fly up? I cannot live anymore. I can't.
They've actually got apps for the washers and dryers.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And the other one is called the Postal Service.
Postal Service. They don't work hard enough. Get me something to make it easy. I cannot live without convenience. What about you two? And I don't want to hear anything, Tripp. Just because you're in the military, it doesn't mean you have to actually do without things every now and then. I don't want to hear about that.
Well, I think for me, it's an interesting topic for a couple reasons. First is, so convenience is something that I definitely value in my life, and I try to structure a good portion of my life around. Part of it, I think, has to do with the fact that maybe I am naturally lazy in certain areas of my life. There's certain things that I don't like to do or repeat certain patterns. So I do wish for that level of convenience. But I do also think that with convenience, there's a price to pay. And that is in certain things being convenient. For example, one of my friends, she really values the whole experience of Instacart. So she'll create the whole grocery list and have someone else go shopping. I don't like that. And partially why I don't like it is because I actually enjoy going to the grocery store. I enjoy spending time going between the aisles, and I enjoy impulse buying, if I'm being honest. Right? I enjoy getting that box of Oreo cookies when I know for a fact I don't need it, or that tub of ice cream that just accidentally slips into my crate. So those things that I enjoy, but at the same time, that's because I look forward to that experience. In her case, she does not like a second of it. I mean, she will literally bypass lines and wait however long that's needed in order for someone else to complete that particular task. So I think, if anything, what I've learned from that experience is that convenience comes with a price. And that's, what is the price you're willing to pay? In my case, I am not willing to pay the price when it takes away from an experience. In her case, her experience is completely different, because she could continue doing the things that she's a part of and yet have some of these other tasks done. So I don't know if the two of you can relate to that. Do you do your grocery shopping in similar ways, or do you actually enjoy going to the store and picking out and knowing the fact that you're going to impulse buy regardless?
I like going out and shop. To me, that's a way for me to get away in a sense. Like I have to go. We were talking to Oleg earlier. I was talking about if I have enough alone time, just me and my dog's not talking to me anymore, I got to get out and go to Walmart and just start bumping into people and talking to them. I have to get it out of my system some way, shape, or form. Or I look at my phone, and we were talking about how it's, who's not at work right now? Who can I call for a few minutes? But I was actually thinking about this topic before we started recording. And I was thinking, I'm not going to tell my age by any means by sharing this story, because we're all in our 20s on here. And
don't forget that. Jessica,
absolutely.
That includes you. I see you. But you're only 16, Jessica, so you can call us old all you want.
But I remember reading a newspaper, and having to wake up the next day to find out a sports score or stats or something as a sports fan. I remember having to watch like the news for me, I'll just say Sports Center. That doesn't make me sound too old. But I remember watching like Sports Center at night to find out what happened. But now, if our phone's not refreshing fast enough, we get very impatient with that. And it's just but I've adapted to it. I've adapted to it just like everybody else. And now convenience has become like another form of income. I mean, you go to Walt Disney World where they have fast passes. You want your groceries taken out to your car. Walmart and all these places have that now. So now it's become more of it's like a whole nother line of income for companies.
I'm glad that I didn't have to experience that, Bodie, waiting for the score from the newspaper. I mean, I've definitely read a fair share of newspapers through my life, but I'm very fortunate to have not have had that form of life.
I was really young. I was like 4.
I'm fortunate to have
reading
been
the sports page.
The age of television and at least some form of radio that, whenever I was told to go to bed, which I didn't find to be a convenient hour, and I would turn the radio on and sit by the radio and just listen to the Pistons either lose or win. But it's the same exact thing. I think it's a really good point that you bring up as well, as far as convenience almost being a form of currency that we're willing to trade our time and efforts for.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fascinating to observe how, I don't know what your perspectives are, or Jessica or anyone else that's listening, but if anything, what I've observed is that this form of currency has emerged only in the recent years, 5 to 10 years, really. At least ever since social media became what it is today.
Perhaps it's accelerated. Think about it. The currency associated with convenience has been with us at least since the Industrial Revolution and probably before that. Let's talk about cars. That made it easy, especially once the interstate system was built, for us to travel from one side of the country to the other. And as much as
traveling, not use a horse,
right, or a stagecoach or a covered wagon, like those Little House on the Prairie people. Now, I've always kind of wanted to travel across the country in a covered wagon, but think about the conveniences that you wouldn't have, and we won't talk about the unspeakable ones. We'll just talk about some of the basic ones, like lack of air conditioning or lack of bumpy roads, or what if that wooden wheel on that covered wagon broke and you didn't have a spare wheel in the back of your covered wagon, or there was something wrong with the axle, or what if someone was annoying you and you had to go on a month, however many months it took to cross the United States, or weeks, listen to that person chatter away in the heat. Right, like even those sorts of things, mass production, the printing press, even before that provided a huge amount of luxury or convenience, because it meant people didn't have to transcribe the Bible from beginning to end. Oh my God, can you imagine having to transcribe? You're on the last page of the book of Revelations, on the last verse, and you accidentally have the word "the" instead of "a." And you have to start all over again? Oh, my God.
Yeah. Mr. Mason, you might be able to actually speak to Jessica's comment here. So she put in the comment section here talking about convenience and the relationship it has with options that are being healthy, considering that on your podcast you speak a lot about ethics in particular. Do you think it is ethical to make some of these food options more convenient but less healthy?
Great question. So I'm going to give you all a sneak preview. Today I recorded an episode with a guest on my podcast called Melody Stanford Martin, who is what's called a social ethicist. And for those of you who are not familiar with social ethics, traditional ethics focuses on the specific individual decisions that we grapple with and how that impacts whether we are right or wrong. And so the traditional ethicist would argue that we would look at whether we ourselves are somehow directly impacting another, and whether we're grappling with our core value system when we make a decision about buying or eating something or another. Now, the social ethicist takes us a step further and demands that we look at entire systems that we might be involved in that can impact the choices that we make, not just as to our own sense of conscience, but upon the impact of others in completely different areas of the system. And the reason why I mention that is because, Jessica, what you're talking about really does go as to the extent to which we want to walk down the road of social ethics as a value system that we employ when we make decisions like this. We are in a food system. That includes a number of different components. It includes the ecology of the natural world, the animals that we may be, or plants that we may or may not be making choices around. It includes the industrial systems. It includes the farming system. It includes the system of stores from which we may or may not be purchasing the food that we buy. It includes other countries where there may be materials that are used that can impact the decisions that we make. And by the way, it includes assessments as to cost and our own economic viability. I used to own a t-shirt printing company, much like Spectrum Designs Foundation, which is the sponsor of the show that does amazing printing work and employs, as an ethical matter, people that are on the autistic spectrum. And anyone who wants to print t-shirts should use them. I'm just saying. But it's interesting. Clients would walk in, I would give them a tour of the shop so they understood the printing process and they loved it, and they would also understand our pricing. And so many times people would come in kind of equivalent to what you're talking about, Jessica, and say something like, I want to make an ethical choice. I want to buy American, and it needs to be, the materials need to be made on a sustainable farm that isn't polluting the water and doing all this other stuff. Great. There are incredible manufacturers that do that are American and deserve our support. This is the price per unit for a t-shirt. Suddenly, that Guatemalan farmer that was spending or person in the field whose hands were coming off because they were working so hard, and the people that were dying in that Chinese factory, and the pollution in the rivers of Bangladesh, and the people in the supply chain that were being hurt, and the pollution in the environment didn't matter that much. And the difference, by the way, might have just been $1 per t-shirt, but people cared, and people's ethics, the sliding scale of ethics, went down for the sake of convenience. Convenience that you mentioned earlier, Tripp, in terms of convenience being the currency of the differential between the non-sustainable, non-American produced, polluting and damaging to the whole world t-shirt, and the t-shirt that meets the highest possible ethical standards that we have available to us. And by the way, even thinking about ethics from a systemic perspective, perhaps by even offering these cheapy shirts, I was behaving unethically for the sense of my own convenience. It's convenient and easy to just sell people a t-shirt and not mention it unless they ask for it. It was convenient and easy for me to constantly look the other way and not think about, for instance, the dyes that were in some of these t-shirts. Fast fashion. People would wear things once or twice. They'd take pictures of themselves on Instagram, then throw that into the trash. And we made a lot of money off of fast fashion. Was I behaving ethically or not? Was there a price associated with the convenience of fast fashion? And am I really able to live with that? I hadn't thought about that really until you said that, Jessica. And that's what social ethics and systems-based ethics is all about. Convenience as part of a system.
So does that really boil down to developing individual ethics then, in order for a system like that to work, where we recognize the fact that everyone's decision making can influence the next in line, so to speak?
First of all, I have to acknowledge Jessica because she just made an ethical decision, which was requesting an introduction to Spectrum. Yes, Jessica, I will 100% do that, and I'll make sure that they know that you found out about it through this show. Thank you very, very much for supporting. There's a 90%, by the way, unemployment rate in the community of people that are on the autistic spectrum. So you actually are helping people. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My personal feeling is that actually we should look at the systems. But one of the things that this ethicist acknowledged is that it can be very overwhelming. Where do I even begin? She proposed reparations, not just for certain ethnic groups, but reparations across the board for people that are impacted by the various systemic decisions that we make. Are we prepared for that level of sacrifice to support the convenience that we live with now? What about you guys?
Bodhi, do you consider that? Do you consider ethics when it comes to convenience?
I do consider it. It's almost conditioned in us. But I think just me personally, in terms of my character, making ethical decisions. But I think, a lot of things when it comes down to corporate America and, like fast food, for example, I think Scott, has the right mindset when he's like, I've never really thought about it like that before. But I think a lot of companies, they're looking at that more than anything else. If it's convenient, if it's providing them, lining the pockets, I think a lot of companies almost, they'll turn ahead to whether or not it's an ethical decision at times until something comes out and says that they have been unethical. And then it becomes, an issue at that point. But that kind of goes into the conveniency piece as well, because anything that happens now is out there at our fingertips on social media, whether you're doing something ethically or unethical, ethical decision or unethical decision. It's like right there, real time for people to pick up on. Sometimes before you even know something's happened to you, everybody else is aware of it.
Yeah.
Not to go complete off tangent off this topic, but do either of you think that it's possible to develop healthy fast food chains at the same scale that we currently have available and still maintain the level of convenience that they're able to provide to us? Because I've been wondering about this for a while, and I by no means want to speak poorly about any of the companies out there, but at the same time, I've been curious, like, what is the actual challenge to making a lot of these options healthier compared to what they currently are? I mean, is it truly the cost? Is it the lack of resource? Is it because the market demands another form of convenience rather than the healthy ones, which supposedly take a little bit longer, but that's not even always the case. The preparation time, what I've learned is that when I've gone to healthier options as far as restaurants go, they take just as long, maybe even shorter sometimes. So I've really been curious, and I don't know if the two of you can answer this question or add your perspectives on it, but do you think that's possible? Is it possible to develop healthy fast food chains and still make them just as convenient as they are right now?
I do. And I think if you look at, like the history of fast foods, I mean, it just started out with nuggets and fries and burgers. But I think you look lately, probably I'd say, I don't know, the last 10, 15 years or so, you start seeing, calories popping up on boards, and they have a healthy menu almost anywhere you go now. But when you're dealing with a lot of fast foods, you're dealing with a lot of processed food, and that's not exactly the best, health option for you. Now, as of late, you've seen a lot more food trucks. You've seen a lot more healthier options in terms of different, franchises that focus simply on the healthy side. And you're right. Sometimes it can take just as long, if not shorter, because you're dealing with, a lot of vegetables, a lot of plant-based things that you don't necessarily have to prep like you would chicken or steak or anything like that. But I think it's definitely possible. I think it's definitely doable. And I think that you will probably see in the next couple of years more and more health options in terms of that convenience and having them at your fingertips. Because like for me, if I ride down the road right now and I don't have a whole lot of time, I've got to get to work and I need something healthy, my best option, honestly, is like a black bean burrito from Taco Bell or something. And that's not my number one choice, but it's convenient. It's quick. I don't have to cook. I don't have to meal prep. I don't have to go grab something at Walmart. But I think you definitely see more options. And I think, food trucks, entrepreneurs, Shark Tank has a lot of people out there that are pushing healthy items in restaurants and trying to get them franchised.
I will say this, though. This goes as to us making decisions around opportunity costs and making them carefully. By the way, I see that Jessica agrees with you, Tripp, and I'd certainly hope for the sake of this country and our children that we are able to begin to move more and more in that direction. Again, I'm going to go back to this t-shirt printing company that I owned. Our pricing, and we would say this up front, wasn't the cheapest. It was competitive, but not the cheapest. And when I would give these shop tours, a lot of it was because the reason I did that was so I could point out the quality control methods that we had plastered all over the walls to ensure a certain level of quality that justified us paying people a certain amount, which would help explain why our pricing wasn't rock bottom. And there were people who actually were grateful and impressed. We dealt with like a lot of art museums or high fashion people that really cared about quality, even when it came to t-shirts. They didn't want their brand at stake, and they liked the fact that we paid people more because it meant that there would likely be more attention to detail, and they could demand more from us from a quality perspective, which we were happy to deliver on. But I'll never forget, there was a client we had who basically, I had that whole spiel. This was a client that was a charity helping the unfortunate. And they refused to go with us because one thing, we had a turnaround time. I said, look, we can't make that. It was over the 4th of July, I believe, and our employees have the day off. And this person very nastily sent me an email saying, well, I went with someone else because they were willing to actually work over the weekend. And that was a little bit ironic to me. We actually cared enough about our employees to make sure that they had a holiday. We weren't going to work them on the 4th of July. And that person was, from an ethical perspective, perfectly fine with going with a shop that was willing to do that to their employees. And so there can be a certain level of hypocrisy. But, Tripp, you raise a certain point here, which goes as to what I was talking about earlier around the sheer number of systems that are out there and the overlapping issues that they present with each of us. Convenience. Convenience, which is the underlying theme of this show, is sometimes driven not by just our desire to have things easy because we're lazy, but because the demands of the system, the economic system that we work in, or it may just be the employer, it may be the situation that we're in, demands it. That we can't, if you're in the military, if you have to be somewhere and do something, if there's a deployment, or let's say you have a class and then you have a personal emergency and your child's in the hospital, you may want to be with your child as long as you can be and then race to work in as quick of an amount of time as you can because you care about your child. Convenience really is something that matters. And so you have to make a choice that might be superficially unethical, or maybe it's not. Maybe all of these things about what convenience is and what we can sacrifice or not are really so determined by situations that it's meaningless to even begin to think about them from a qualitative matter. Maybe I should just throw up my hands and give up. By the way, for the sake of healthy food, I will say this now, and I will be the first to do it on this show. I look forward to the day, and I hope it's soon, when we begin to mass produce insect burgers, because I will be the first to eat one. When it comes to ethics and convenience,
is that a thing? Is that an actual concept?
I was like, is that a New York thing? What is that?
Not a New York thing, but apparently environmentally, as you can imagine, insects produce much more quickly. They don't have a lot of space needs. They don't have a lot of needs in terms of, providing all sorts of weird foods and stuff. So they can be made into a high quality protein quite quickly and easily and for a comparable cost. And if you eat them, apparently would have a very positive, at least according to some, a very positive environmental impact and could actually help alleviate hunger because they're so plentiful. They reproduce at such a rate, they could easily just and do that insect thing that they do and be feeding people around the world in a way that cows, chicken, things like that simply can't. They're too advanced in their development as species.
I got to ask, while you went down there, what is an insect that you would not consider eating?
If I knew what it was, probably a roach. But that being said, look, I've been to, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this experience at some point during this hour. I've been to Southeast Asia and in Cambodia. The street food that you would see, and this actually may have been the case in other parts, included grilled scorpion and other sorts of insects. I believe there may have been crickets as well. And I wasn't opposed to, what'd you say?
That's a common one, yeah.
Crickets. And they look, there were I had a jerky snake salad when I was there. And snakes also are one of those things that people think that they might not want to eat because it sounds intuitively gross, but it's a high quality protein. Again, they reproduce very easily. Insects, we have no evidence that if you just stick them in a small space and they're buzzing around, I don't know what evidence there is that they are suffering pain or not, but they're certainly not going to suffer to the same extent that a chicken in a coop is. Jessica says, I lost you. Jessica, don't worry. I'm going to be sending you from a future sponsor of this show, Cricket Burgers.
I was going to say, we need to tap into the cricket burger market for the show.
Oh boy. Well, for me, while I brought up that topic, I might as well try answer it myself. Spiders. I don't know if I would eat spider burger.
They had, by the way, spiders on skewers as well.
See, I would be a mosquito. I wouldn't eat mosquitoes. They're carrying blood around. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. That's a really interesting concept as far as how food production could be done and how it could actually help maybe streamline or eliminate a lot of the problems that we do experience when it comes to livestock, for example. I mean, being able to maintain a farm or being able to maintain however many cows that people manage, that takes a lot of time and resources. And thinking about the insects part, that's why I was curious about the concept. And I don't know if it's in what stage of production it all is, but it's an interesting thing to ponder upon.
It is, and I don't mean I'm not laughing.
What if the food chain did become that? In fact, it is.
Oh yeah,
in some parts of the world.
I just have to interrupt here. Jessica has me laughing. She says, "Lesson: we do not send our vegan friends insect burgers." And Jessica's correctly pointed out there are vegan options here that don't involve eating crickets.
Mm.
But yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of eager to try it when I'm in Cambodia and in Vietnam, those places. It will definitely be first. Hopefully not once in a lifetime experience, but at the same time, it's just like you don't know what you don't know.
Speaking of convenience, you could probably throw it in Google, and I guarantee you somewhere in the States is probably doing it, and you could probably get it sent to you.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah.
So, which is crazy about where I was going to ask y'all, do you think that convenience is something that we've conditioned ourselves to be, to have that convenience? And then do you think, where does it stop? If that makes sense.
I'm glad you asked that. I'm going to go back to Cambodia for a minute, because that was directly where I was going to head if the conversation lent itself that way. So I went bicycling through Cambodia with my husband.
How long ago did you go?
It was probably 4 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Maybe 5 years ago. It was relatively recent, but not yesterday. And it's recent enough that I suspect this exact same situation that I'm about to describe is still there. So we bicycled in the back roads through these fields and all this stuff to these small, obscure towns. And there was one town that we went to. It was very small. It was remote. And its entire power grid was a car battery. That was it. And they would, whenever that battery ran out, they would go to whatever charging station, which was walkable, which was a place they would walk to and get the thing charged and then come back and have some power. So you could imagine that the level of convenience that they had, if their entire village was being powered by a car battery, was not what we would expect. Yet they were somehow surviving. And I'm not saying that they were walking around in silk robes and plush carpets and all that sort of stuff, but I didn't get a sense of it. I didn't get a sense that I was in a place that was just this cesspool of human misery, like some seventh circle of hell or anything either.
Well, one thing that I'll add on to it is I think to a degree, at least having lived in the States and been able to experience different levels of convenience, I think to a degree it does get taken for granted without a doubt. And I'll say that without any sense of guilt or shame around it, because it's one of those things where I think if that's a situation you're born into, how can you know any different? How can you know any different besides if you choose to take your own actions to explore other ways that, let's say, packages get delivered? If you were born into an era where the only way that you know a package is delivered through a service like Amazon, FedEx, Postal Service, whatever it is, then how can you know or expect things to be any different? Same thing with food. Now, I'm not saying that that's an excuse, so to speak, to not explore or to learn other ways that the world operates. But I think for me, that's something that I've tried to acknowledge and challenge myself on, is challenging my own levels of convenience. Whatever I choose to find that comes at a snap of the fingertips. I mean, really think about this for a second. We're able to connect through StreamYard with what? 4 clicks of a button? 5 at best or at most? And then boom, we're able to broadcast to literally an entire world. Whoever wants to tune in can. And we're able to share whatever perspectives that are on our mind. We're able to share Bodhi's background as well, which that was going to be my next question, is how convenient is it to find any of the characters there when you need it? But that's a thing. It's that I find that to be fascinating for me, is the number of times I'll take certain things because they're convenient, and then just having to take a conscious step back to appreciate the fact that, yes, it's convenient, but it doesn't have to be this way. That convenience could also be gone within a matter of seconds. Me not having an Amazon Prime account could get rid of that convenience. I may not have the convenience to get the package delivered within, 24 hours, 48 hours? Some really crazy, like lightning speed almost. So that's where I think that, going back to Scott's point, I think it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. And maybe living in this States, at least from my lens, that's something I have to consciously do, is challenge my own level of convenience when it comes to everything. Having the convenience to drive and not take a bus.
Or a covered
Having
wagon.
the convenience to take the bus and not walk.
It was even when we were you were talking about like logging on here with a couple of clicks. When we were starting, right before we got going, I clicked on the link and it took me to like a Google Maps. And I had to actually write out the last part of the URL. And I was like, oh, I had to write it on a separate sheet of paper. I'm like, it's gonna take me forever to get in there. And it literally took me like a minute. But one of the reasons I brought that up was because, this question is because it's almost like y'all have heard of the allegory of the cave?
Yes, Plato.
And, Plato's allegory of the cave, where they're for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, basically in like 30 seconds, you lived in the cave, you're chained in the cave, you've seen these shadows, and then one day you break free and you escape the cave, and you see that the shadows were really just little stick figures being shown to you, and that's all you've known. And then you go out there and you see the sun, and it's either, oh my gosh, I'm not ready for this, or you go back and tell everybody and they just completely don't believe you, and it's just they rebel against you. Well, and it's very eerily similar to what happens with society now with almost any topic you bring up. But I grew up only knowing how to have everything once I got past the newspaper 10 o'clock news stage. But when we got into like this, when I was 4, but now we get into this digital age where everything is at your fingertips. And whenever my family moved to Germany in 2013, right when we got there, it's like, wait a minute, we don't have cable television in English. We don't have Walmart. We don't have fast food. My family, for the first month, total culture shock over there. We're like, what do you mean we have to talk to each other in the house? And we have to, we have to cook meals, and we have to, wait a day later for something to be on Hulu, which for a lot of people, it's like Game of Thrones season finales coming out. We had to wait a day later. And it was, and we're on there trying to find all these sketchy websites to watch it from so we could see it. But when we came back to the States, we had been conditioned to not have that convenience. To where when we do come back to the States, now we are total culture shock the complete opposite way. We're like, my daughter who, when we left, I believe was 5 years old when we moved to Germany. We came back and she was like 11. And I remember taking her down the highway from Atlanta to Alabama. Yes, Jessica, I'm in Alabama as well. But driving down the highway, she was looking at like all these billboards and everything going all over the place and fast food. You know, Germany, you drive for seems like days before you see a gas station or fast food. Here, it's like every mile you have something. And going in Walmart and Target and, like you said, Amazon. We get Amazon Prime because we want something shipped a day or two as opposed to 4 days.
And we get mad if it's in that time that it's promised, which 99% of the time it literally gets delivered in that time frame.
I did it the other day. I ordered something and I was like, even ordering it, I was like, no, I don't need it. But I was like, I need that by Thursday. Why is it telling me it's Saturday? Yeah, I need it 5 minutes
Ago.
Why is it saying Saturday?
It as I'm
they should be writing my name on the label. But we get that way. And then it's so it's crazy because I went from, you know, having convenience to not having it to where now we actually look back in a weird way. Like I look back and I'm like, I would rather have that Germany lifestyle as opposed to this fast-paced, everything at your fingertips. Because when you really break it down, it's stressful. We get stressed when things like that aren't working for us, or if the car in front of us doesn't understand that I need them to get out of the way because it'd be more convenient for me.
And Jessica actually talks about making a purchase regarding AMC Plus so she could watch The Walking Dead a little bit early, which is a humorous way of addressing that exact FOMO sort of thing. I've got to ask you, Tripp, then coming back to Germany, did you, after that culture shock, and let's face it, Germany is still going to be light years ahead of other parts of the world in terms of convenience and ease of living from that sort of perspective. Did you view America or our culture any different? You said there was a culture shock. Was there judgment involved in that? If not by you, maybe by other people that you knew?
Oh yeah, lots of judgment on my part. No, it's over there. I think that the convenience, I think in a way, takes away from connection. And I think that, for example, my family could be sitting in the living room watching television and we can see it happened the other day, an actress popped up and I was like, what movie is she in? Next thing you know, we go from being present with each other to now we're on our phones looking it up. And then you start going down the rabbit hole of the internet and you start finding other things. That movie brought up something else. And then you start looking at this. And I think that having that convenience over there, I think we were able to connect and be present with each other more, where I feel like over here, it's just go, go, go. What's the next thing you got to be doing? We're all about checking boxes on lists and scheduling thing. I mean, the three of us with our podcast and stuff, for example.
Oh yeah.
But even with that, it's convenient. What's a convenient time for you to record? What's a convenient time? What works best for you? So here,
Jessica's in that boat too, by the way. She's a podcaster.
Really? Okay.
She says she needs to connect with you. I actually agree. You all will get along well. She's a genuinely lovely person.
What do you guys think is the relationship between convenience and how convenience is formed and societal expectations? Do you think societal expectations contribute to the level of convenience that we choose to accept as the acceptable norm?
I do, but I want to hear what Scott's got. I think Scott's going to word it better than me.
I actually think you said it beautifully. My comment was going to be, you kind of made that point, at least your perspective on it, very clear, Tripp. And then the next question is, if we think that that's not necessarily a good thing because it encourages unethical choices, or even dangerous choices, then what is our power to change that? And the reason I mentioned dangerous, think about this. You raise a very interesting point around convenience, Tripp. And I'm going to tie it into an example that I used earlier. Let's say you were running to your class late because of an emergency that your child had. Let's say they were in the hospital. And so you were sitting, like you just mentioned a minute ago, infuriated because some dawdling person is driving in a car slow as molasses in front of you, not concerned about anything in the world, and never occurring to them that there might be people who have other priorities in their lives, like getting to work on time due to a child's injury. And so you choose to push that pedal and maybe make a risky choice to go around them in a place where the median line is solid as opposed to dotted. And something very bad happens, like you disappear from the world, like you just did from your screen. and
I'm coming back.
I'm just giving you a hard time. There was a resurrection, and so everything ended up well in this particular story. But in other stories, the ending might be quite tragic because of social expectations. How and where do we fight those expectations if we agree that they're there? I'm going to argue it's hard to dispute that social expectations do not pressure us with regards to convenience. I have not had an employer ever whose time or workload expectations have ever been reduced for me. I've never seen that happen.
I also get curious. I think for me, when I think about different cultures, having really experienced two cultures, so to speak, but that level of convenience and how the societal expectations and pressure do add to its own, almost, they add a certain level of meaning to what becomes acceptable within that. For example, as Bodhi, you were talking about it, and Scott, you mentioned in your prior sharing, is this concept of many of us, I think, wanting things to be instantaneous. I mean, place the order through Amazon, and then I catch myself doing the same exact thing. It's as if while I am browsing, I'm expecting the person to have the same exact connection halfway across the world or wherever the fulfillment is being made, and for them to already put the label on the package. So once I hit buy now, it's just boom, sent to me immediately. But the reality of the matter is it doesn't happen. And the other thing that I also find fascinating about my own experience is in situations, let's say, where the packages are late, right? For whatever reason. I mean, having to go halfway across the country in the middle of a snowstorm or halfway across the world, and it's delayed for a variety of reasons. And then yet here I am sitting back here and experiencing all kinds of frustration and tension due to that event taking place. When the reality of the matter is, I not very rarely, but I try and take the whole thing into perspective as far as, okay, this package is getting delivered even from halfway across the state, okay, halfway across Michigan, halfway across Texas, or wherever it is. The path that it has to take to get there is not necessarily a straight shot. It's not necessarily a one-way street or a 5-minute drive. Sometimes it's so much more. So I find that to be interesting whenever I get caught in those situations. And then I experience, as I'm sure Jessica does sometimes as well, the frustration of like, where is this package? Why is it not here yet? And then I'll be sitting by the door waiting for it. Can you guys relate? Do you guys ever do that? If you know a package is coming, you'll literally like just waste time sitting by the door.
Go check the mailbox like 4 times and you're like.
Or email. Email is another example. You send an email and then you sit there and you literally hit refresh. You delete the app. You go back into the app again. What, 5 seconds later? 10?
We do it with text messages. We're really bad about it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
we are.
Black hits caught and I responded. Did I say something bad? Or is this on me? Like, should I have reframed it differently?
Well,
should I give him a call this time?
Let me just be a little bit wicked here.
Yeah. Explain to me.
I love bringing out my inner dark lord.
Explain to me why that happens with you.
So, one issue, going back to Jessica's point about social expectations and Tripp's about pressure to be there and do something and having all these deadlines, is that people forget, due to the convenience that we have come to rely on, that there are boundaries in the world. And sometimes, and I've never done this to either of you all, nor would I, because we don't have that sort of relationship. And I certainly wouldn't do it with Jessica, who's notoriously patient, at least to me. But I will say that there are certain people that I work with where the expectation of convenience is something I leverage to get those boundaries under control. If I get texts from you, as some people have been known to do, and then I get Facebook messengers, and I get WhatsApp pings, and I get an email, and I get a phone call, and I get a LinkedIn message, within 3 minutes. Sometimes, especially if it's not an emergency, right? If it's my husband, I'm pretty much going to pick it up and assume something dire is going on, or it may be a client issue that really they're whipped up about something that they have a right to be whipped up about, and I need to be there for them. But many times it's just that expectation that someone responds right away. And so I can leverage that expectations to set boundaries.
At least I know how to get a hold of you now.
So you think. Don't be so naive, old man. But I do think that this sort of boundary, these lack of boundaries that convenience can bring on us are, personally, I feel like it's destructive. We've all got to have boundaries. Even the UPS and USPS guys need to have boundaries.
Unless they're sending my package.
Unless it's your package. But, Tripp, there's also something else I wanted to ask us all about. It goes as to convenience, and it goes as to potentially, depending on how you feel about it, ethics. You've mentioned a very non-New York City phenomenon a couple of times in your conversation, Tripp. It's this word most New Yorkers don't understand. It's almost like an alien tongue. And when it's said, people look at you oddly, and a cloud fills the air, and it's a cloud of confusion and not an opacity of thought. And this word is Walmart.
Ooh.
Now, I love going to visit my husband's family in rural Pennsylvania because they have this word that I've come to understand called Walmart there. It's in common use. And it's a noun.
Yeah.
And it is a location where you go and there is a huge amount of convenience there. And I load up on the magical things that are there at these magical prices are not what you see in New York City. And then when people ask, where did you get all this stuff? How can you afford it? I utter that word, Walmart, and then no one understands what I'm saying anymore. Yeah. And Walmart is an example, by the way, though, of some ambivalent thinking that has occurred around the country around the concept of convenience. Because from a price perspective, Walmart is convenient. No one in their right mind would deny it. In terms of aggregating a whole number of items together in a single location, it is the very definition of convenient. They have such purchasing power that they've changed the entire shape of supply chain operations throughout the world. When I was in India, you would go to, they didn't have Walmarts there either, at least then. And you would go down streets and there would be an entire store that would be nothing but bananas. Then the next one would be nothing but wrenches. Then the next one would be nothing but hammers. And then the next one would be nothing but suspenders. And on and on and on. This Walmart concept of convenience hadn't taken hold there. And I have to wonder if Walmart were to ever successfully go into a place like India, would that convenience, and I'm sure it would be very convenient for the Indian people because it's convenient for anyone, would that ultimately have a cost that would be worth it? What do you all think?
They did have Walmart in Germany, and I'm not going to give the exact years or whatever. I just know that whenever we had moved there, they were like, yeah, Germany had Walmart previously. It didn't go very well.
Really? Why?
Because they're so like loyal to their, the mom and pop, as we call them, places here. There it's family run businesses. And I guess it just didn't, a lot of them, even like, you look at a lot of the higher end stores that mass productions and stuff, it's just not as successful as, especially with restaurants there, as the hole in the wall places, as you mentioned earlier. So yeah, it didn't succeed in Germany. At least whenever I was there and just moving there, and that was 2013. But, yeah, I have no idea how it would go, and it's probably just because of our culture here in the States. We are instantaneous. I want this right now. It's very task driven with us, like needing to get somewhere. What's most convenient for me? You can go to Walmart and pick up every single thing you need. I went in there the other day, and if somebody were to look at my bags, they'd be like, "Wow, you're all over the place with what you came in here shopping for." I mean, you can get food, you can get vitamins, you can get a pillow, you can get a DVD, you can get toys, you can get anything. So I think for us, it's more, we're just so used to that convenience. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Oleg?
Well, I also wonder if when it comes to Walmart or even Jessica's example, Dollar Generals, I wonder if that has to do with the social status or a class that a particular area is not necessarily able to afford, but will adapt more to their lifestyle. For example, when I was living in Austin, which wasn't that long ago, just a couple weeks ago, but there's certain pockets of Austin. For example, there's an area called Bee Cave, and I think it's called Lakeway, where you go in there, and even their version of, let's say, a grocery store or a Walmart is I mean, 10x upgraded version from any other Walmart or an HEB that you go to. So that's where I think there's probably some sort of I think income does play a role in whether or not one is built in a particular area and how it is built and what it chooses to distribute. That is an observation that I made. And then in those areas, what I've also found is that fast food, for example, it's almost non-evident. It is very, very difficult to find a fast food place
In Austin?
in those pockets of Austin, the Bee Cave, Lakeway, some of those neighborhoods. So I don't know if it's because the people that live there have higher incomes, therefore higher income is somehow associated with, let's say, I don't know, a level of health consciousness. Maybe, maybe not. I don't really know. But that's something that I've observed, is that in some of these areas, it's harder to find these options. And so going back to your point, Scott, maybe it's because the lifestyle doesn't actually fit the region that it's in. But going back to your word, Scott, I thought you were going to say the word was no, not Walmart. A word that people don't oftentimes use in New York. No?
No, they use it.
Because you can
they
always create
certainly do
opportunities.
Yeah,
It
so
is
you'll-
interesting. Y'all brought up like social, like social status and all that. I mean, it's the same way with Walmart or Target. Even what Jessica says, yeah, there's a clear distinction, even where I'm at, between Publix and Piggly Wiggly. Like we have a Winn-Dixie right by our house, but when I go, I choose to go to Publix. I'm more of a Publix person.
What are these things? They don't have them here in New York City either.
Publix is like your really nice grocery store. Like I would say I mean, I could go on and on about Publix, but
it's a good place.
Yeah, it's really good. They got anything. Their deli's amazing. They make sushi. Seafood is incredible. But you go to Piggly Wiggly or Winn-Dixie. I mean, my daughter, this is, how my daughter is now. We walk in Winn-Dixie and she's like, oh my gosh, that smell. You walk in Publix and there's fresh flowers by the door. So it's huge difference between them. Yeah.
Do you also find that there might be a connection? And I don't claim to be someone who has enough knowledge to even hold a conversation about this, but do you find that the things that get built are somehow correlated with, let's say, food deserts, areas that don't have the same income status or the same access to resources? Like, I'll give you an example. Some of the places I would go around, even here, going around Ann Arbor to some of the other suburbs or some of the towns, I mean, you just know that you have hit certain food deserts, because when you get into those spots, there is a dollar store followed by a Walmart, followed by Taco Bell, followed by X. You guys get the point. So I wonder, to what degree is that just intentionally built in order to fit the lifestyle and the group that the particular city or town is experiencing or living.
I think you
so
have
I don't know how much of that is really convenience rather than, I guess you could say it is convenience, or rather than just natural necessity of what the population in that town can actually afford.
Sometimes I think also, going back to Tripp's original theme of time related to this, is that, and some other factors related to convenience, convenience being a currency, being a convenience. You often can show social status by not needing convenience, because you have the luxury to be able to sacrifice the opportunity costs associated with not having the convenience. So, for instance, you may be wealthy enough to be able to have the convenience of taking, or inconvenience, actually, depending on it. You can take a huge amount of time off and inconvenience everyone around you because you have the social capital to be able to do that. And yeah, you might come back and complain about how inconvenient it is to you, for you to have to catch up on your emails and all that sort of stuff, but you've had administrative assistants or executive assistants or other things like that help you all along. Meanwhile, people that are working in some of these stores, including the more glamorous grocery stores, may not have the ability to take a vacation, for instance, because it's, from a capital perspective, too inconvenient for them to take time off. They could lose their job.
I used to be a waiter. I was a 2-time server of the year. Just throwing that out there at Red Lobster.
Congratulations. Red Lobster. I love Red Lobster.
2007 and 2008. But for me, I agree with you 100%. It was, if I took time off, that was money that I was losing. And my wife and I were both working at Red Lobster at that time. And it was, even for us to take a trip or something, it was not convenient, at least. It was never a good time because there was always people coming in to eat and there was always money to be made there. And we weren't on salary. So yeah, I definitely think that, money has a lot to do with that. And even look now, what happens if I want to send, let's say Oleg is out of the generosity, wants to send me some money.
I thought it was going to be the other way around.
No. I was careful with how I said it, but let's say like Oleg's like, you know what, Tripp, I'm going to send you some money. I could have money in minutes through all these cash apps and stuff that we have now. Yeah. And as opposed to if you try to go through, let's say you're going through like Bank of America and you're like, hey, I want to transfer some money over to Scott. Well, it's going to take 5 days. Ooh, that's too long.
Write a check.
Or go get a check cleared or something. And they're like, oh, we're going to have a hold on this check. And people freak out. People that I know that work at credit unions or banks say that all the time. People come in and they get frustrated because it's going to be a little bit of a hold on this. It's not convenient for them. But yet we've got Zelle and all these other cash apps out there now where you could, both of you, if you did, even anybody who wants to start sending me money, I could have that set up in no time and it could be sent right over to me. It's just, money, convenient.
Well, part of it, it also goes back to, I think, how we built the society to begin with, at least this part of the world, is that we built it around that form of convenience. So therefore it has become almost a pillar to our existence. And think about it, the way that we're able to transfer money, the way that we're able to do this, the way that we're able to release these episodes simultaneously across different platforms, those are all their own form of convenience. If someone doesn't catch us live today or right now, they can immediately go to YouTube, Facebook, wherever, and find the previous episodes. So I find that to be also fascinating. And I think at the same time, it's something that we've built, in my opinion, as a society. And from here, it's like, it's almost become an expectation for us to perform in that way.
Jessica brought up something really interesting, COVID, how COVID impacted our convenience. And what was one of the biggest issues people were having with March of 2020? It was inconvenient for them to go out. They weren't able to go out and do stuff. They were having to spend more time with people in their house and everything. And it was just, it was making things a little bit more difficult for us. And
it kind of is still like that. If you think about it, the inconvenience of not wearing a mask.
And even now,
we're having employees that don't do that. The inconvenience of having employees that don't have vaccines.
Yeah, I was teaching without a mask for the longest time. The military was like, if you're vaccinated, you can go in there and teach. And then something got pushed down that basically said all DoD building, military buildings. Basically, you gotta have your mask back on regardless of your vaccination status. And for me, being up there, like, so wait a minute, so I have to be up here 8 hours a day with my mask back on? That's not convenient for me. And I had to go teach down at Langley in Virginia just last week. And I remember going up there to teach in front of the students. And I was like, do I have to have my mask? Oh, I have to keep my mask on the whole time I'm teaching? Okay. So it was like more inconvenient for me to have to keep adjusting this as I kept speaking. And I think that really COVID really challenged a lot of people. And I think if it really boils down to what it was that conveniency factor.
It's a challenging topic because humans, and it may be something I'm more than welcome to have you disagree with me on, but what we need and what we're capable of, there's such a massive gap. You think about it for so long. I'll tell you one thing that's inconvenient, but actually is a convenience. And this is an example of flip sides of it. So I've had to have some moles removed. And because of that, I wear sunscreen everywhere I go. Even if I'm just walking outside to drop something in the mailbox down the corner, I just completely cover myself in sunscreen. It is an inconvenience to have to put it on. Of course, it would be a far graver inconvenience if I had to go back over and over to have more and more and more moles removed, or even worse, God forbid. But I think about times, and I gripe about having to put on sunscreen everywhere I go. I don't have to, but I choose to, I should say. But in any event, I think about long ago, people didn't have sunscreen, probably not even that long ago. They didn't have it. They just got a mole and they died a miserable, horrible death. That's a lot more inconvenient than putting on sunscreen. So the degree of inconvenience as a real factor in our life, I do feel has gotten exaggerated. And that is something that I feel, I'll just put it out here. I feel it weakens us. I feel it divides us from each other. I feel like it makes us less and less prepared for bigger challenges because we don't have the resilience, the tools to be able to buckle up if there are major sacrifices that are going to need to be made. What if, for instance, some sort of bizarre side effect of climate change were to be the releases of gases that previously were within the ground that made the air much, much less breathable for us? And we had to move beyond masks and wear things like some sort of respirator all the time. Could we handle it? If we had to relocate an entire city because of rising seas and people had to leave behind their rugs and their clothes and their jewelry boxes, could people handle it? One of my favorite stories when I was a little boy was this book by Isaac Singer, very famous Israeli, or maybe he's American Jewish author. And it was called The Sinful City, and it was about Sodom and Gomorrah. And in it, for those of you who don't know, Sodom and Gomorrah was a city that was notoriously inhospitable to strangers. And God sent his angels down to save the patriarch Lot and his family. And the angels told Lot and his family, run from this city tonight. Don't look back or you will die. And they all ran. And God rained fire and brimstone down on these cities and utterly annihilated them. But Lot's wife looked back and instantly turned into a pillar of salt. Now, of all the fantastical, dramatic things that happen in the Bible, I've got to say, someone stone cold turning into a pillar of salt is right up there in the top ranks. Pretty dramatic. Fun sort of thing to act out, right? Like running and then suddenly you're a pillar of salt. And in this version of the story that he told, which he elaborated on, the whole thing, Lot and his wife and his children were super rich. And as they were running, the angels tell them, leave the city. Lot grabs his wife and his daughters and basically makes them leave, especially the wife. And she screams, my house, my jewels, my clothes, what am I going to do? She can't imagine her life without these things, so she looks back. That's why she looks back. She can't do without these conveniences that were in Sodom. And so she turns instantly into a pillar of salt. And I wonder, metaphorically, really, were we to face catastrophes, if we cannot do without minor conveniences, will we turn into pillars of salt when real emergencies happen?
Well, I think this is actually, at least in my opinion, it's a perfect segue into get into a little bit about our work and what we do. And I'd love to start with Bodhi, because I know you do a lot of this work when it comes to resiliency training and being able to put people in similar situations, as Scott just described, and ask themselves the more difficult questions as far as what would you do if you had to relocate. I mean, let's not even go that example, because although I think everything that you did say, Scott, those are all valid points and could happen at any given moment. But also just what do you do given the circumstances right now? What do you do when your place of employment is no longer the same and you have to relocate? So I think it's a great segue to get into a little bit about what we do individually. And go ahead, Scott.
No, and Jessica actually raises sort of a similar question, actually.
Yeah.
Bodhi.
I think for us, talking about if you have to be on the go, I could speak for, at least being in the military, it's constant change. And you have people who go from, living in a nice podcasting room that's nerded out like what I got to, within 12 hours, you're in a tent somewhere and you're having to adjust to, and not have everything at the tip of your fingers like you're used to. So I think for me, I think it's it's a little bit easier, just because I've been conditioned that way for, 12 years now. But yeah, I mean, anything. I mean, you anything in life when you have to have a constant change, like the recent pandemic that we had. Scott, which you mentioned, your example you gave about the pillar of salt, I think that's very true. And I think that's very true with even, society right now. And you see that with people having to adjust and change the way, I saw someone go into a Chipotle and make a big deal about a mask. Mm-hmm. And you hear about it on the news all the time, people getting in fights and people turning into political statements and all this other stuff where they're struggling with that change because it's not convenient. Mm-hmm. So I think if push come to shove, I think we would really, as a society in general, I think we would really struggle, especially like if it went, like you said, Scott, where there was some gas and we had to wear, ventilators or something. I think that's something that we would really struggle with. I think it's something we could do, but I think it's something that we would struggle with a lot.
Well, let's also take into consideration, and Bodhi, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about the podcast and the different resiliency skills that you guys trying to develop through that platform. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the examples that Scott brought up, it's not to say that those things haven't happened before. I mean, you look at places like Chernobyl, for example. That's a real life example that did take place. Plague. Yeah. I mean, COVID to a degree, right? That definitely forced people to be in situations where they couldn't be in same areas. I mean, staying in the same household as those who might be at a higher risk was not an option for some of the people that I know. So they had to go out and find apartments of their own. They had to change their place of residency. Some people had to change their form of income in order to be able to accommodate for those that may not be able to work over a course of a pandemic. So I think those things do happen. And I think, if anything else, spaces like the ones that you and Scott operate in are, to me at least, they're important because they allow opportunities for these real life stories and experiences about different ways that people develop resiliency, regardless of what the circumstances that might be taking place in their lives.
I will say, regarding the related question that Jessica is asking in her 824 remark, do we always need to express when we're inconvenienced? Now, superficially, the answer is an easy no. We've discussed on this show before. We don't always need to offer our opinion about everything. And sometimes it's nice not to. Sometimes there's beauty in just shutting up. But that's not really what Jessica's talking about. Jessica is talking about social reactions to expressions of irritation about inconvenience. I'm challenged by those, but challenged in a state of at least being self-aware of the challenge. My gut instinct, particularly before I got more involved in the self-development world, when I was younger, for instance, in my more hard-edged, less likable Scott Mason phase, before I was the charming, fun, smiling, effervescent person that I am now, if I heard someone complaining because it was inconvenient, they were weak. Good. Complain, you're a target. I'll sweep you out of the way so fast you won't know what happened. But I have come a long way since then. I feel like that approach showed a profound lack within me, almost an emotional poverty of compassion and empathy, a lack of understanding that just because I felt, for whatever reason was in my mind, that if people had to suffer or feel like they were struggling without inconvenience, they needed to suck it up, just like I did, poor me, then they were somehow less worthy or somehow a lesser example of humanity. And so I have come a long way then. I feel actually now that people should be allowed to self-express, because self-expressing when you're inconvenienced, getting that frustration out can help you actually be resilient by unbottling the emotion and letting it happen. Not only that, I also acknowledge that there are various ranges of tolerances to things within the spectrum of humanity, and that understanding that and appreciating that as part of accepting every single human being for what they are, for actualizing a value that I hold very dear at this point in my life, which is that every human being matters as they are. Now, there are limits to this. I will say, for instance, it's inconvenient for me to have a house next to someone who I personally don't like, because I don't like people. I don't like the inconvenience of having to deal with people I don't like. I've got a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that I have less patience with. But if it's with inconvenience around circumstances and challenges, or even change itself, my handling of this for many years was itself a manifestation of poor management of inconvenience by me. Because by being irritated with people that were expressing their inconvenience, I was not managing my own inconvenience, perceived inconvenience, at having to listen to those self-expressions. And really, when you think about it, having to hear other people gripe and moan about inconveniences is just an inconvenience, and a minor one than that. And a minor one at that, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Mason, while you started this on this subject, what are some convenient ways that people can learn more about what you're doing in life?
Go to purposehighway.com. It is functionally my homepage now, and it is most importantly the homepage for my podcast, Scott Mason's Purpose Highway.
And Bodie, for you?
Yeah, I think I missed your cue earlier when you were throwing it to me. Yeah, for me, theshadowspodcast.com. We actually just started a newer show, Rise from the Shadows.
I saw. Tell us about that.
We got a little triad of shows now. We've got, so Ignite is one of our shows. It's actually finished with season 1. Caleb Pearson hosts that. He is going to be picking back up with season 2 pretty soon. The Shadows podcast, we're nearing our 50th episode.
Wow.
That's going to drop pretty soon, but we've got some incredible stuff out there. These two gentlemen have also been guests on the show, and everybody shares their stories, the obstacles they've had to overcome in life to get them to where they are today. So we celebrate their success stories. But our new one, Rise from the Shadows, these shadows are typically about an hour long. Rise from the Shadows, they're those little quick hitters. They're like 20 minutes. And what we do is it's almost like a TEDx type forum where a guest comes on. They talk about some sort of story that they've had to overcome and rise from the ashes, rise from the shadows. And I'll tell you what, we're having some amazing feedback because we're getting people on there who have our past one, Angela Winter, who was on a past episode, talked about something that she's never really opened up about, a traumatic life event. And she said the outpour she's received from her coworkers and friends and stuff has been amazing. So and the next one we have coming up is going to be just as good. We just recorded it yesterday, and it's another person sharing their story about overcoming adversity. So definitely check us out. Go on there, subscribe, and give me some feedback. I won't know how good or bad I'm doing unless you tell me.
We know you're doing well. Before we have the final curtain call on places to find people, I do want to briefly acknowledge Jessica's breakthrough show, which is always worth watching or listening to. And it is groundbreaking. And her season is, I believe you're midway through your season, which has a musical focus, Jessica. And both you and Tripp really deserve applause for using the podcast format in a way that is playful, creative, and pushing boundaries. Thank you for bringing that into the podcasting community. Oleg, Oleg, we put you last because you are anything but the least. So tell us about the podcasting world that you rule over.
For me, that space is overcoming odds, and it's similar stories to the two of you that you focus on, and that's stories of resilience and different ways to reframe adversities in their lives. So for anyone who is looking for a convenient place to go to, it could be at the website below, and that's overcomingodds.today. And you can find this on iTunes, YouTube, wherever it is that you choose to search us. The one other thing that I wanted to mention out there in regard to Jessica's show is that she is actually going to be putting together an event on December 4th, and that is going to feature a variety of musicians, and Overcoming Odds, along with another nonprofit, will be two organizations that will benefit from that particular experience. So for anyone that's interested in supporting us or her work, feel free to check out the link before or below us. And with that, I just want to thank the two of you. I want to thank everyone that's been a part of it. And I think that even when it comes to the subject matter that we discussed today, it might be simple at the surface, but yet it's a lot more complex, because I think there's so much more that determines the meaning of it. And from there, I couldn't be more grateful for the conversation that the three of us chose to share, and different perspectives that we've been able to provide, not only to ourselves, but to those who are listening.
Now, I've got to say before we go, one thing that's very convenient for everyone is looking at people who look good. I'm not bad for 26, but you two, I've heard, look really good in t-shirts, particularly when those t-shirts are gold and they have a squirrel emblem on them. So very soon, y'all are going to be seeing Oleg and Tripp looking pretty handsome in some you-know-what t-shirts. I'm going to be looking at least not totally disheveled. So when those t-shirts come out, if you're interested in them, let us know, because we want you to look every bit as good.
That might actually be a good one for us to do when we all hopefully meet in October.
Give me a medium. It'll look better in pictures. Yeah.
I love it. Well, no, thank you. Thank you to the two of you and Jessica and everyone else for being a part of it. This has been quite the conversation. It definitely shifted my own perspectives around convenience.
Let's connect, Jessica.